We are live. Hey folks, Glenn Kellaway from the basement with my special guest, Robert Lawson, author Robert Lawson, author of Solidarity Forever, The Art and Soul of Stevie Van Zandt. And I'm just going to get on YouTube. Where am I here? How come I can't do that? I'm having trouble here. New tab. Hold on. Bear with me, folks. There we are. I just got to get this set up for a second. Save. And we are done. We're ready to go. Trying to see comments here. Not yet. Trying to see 4 people watching so far. 6 people watching. It's getting there. Yeah, so just a backstory. Robert and I have known each other probably 10, 12, maybe years go back a little bit. From my journey into record stores, and Robert's background is managing record stores, and we just started chatting about music. Found we had a lot in common musically, and we're turning each other on to stuff. Robert turned me on to a ton of great stuff, and we just became friends over the years. And you started writing books. You've had 4 now.
Right.
Nazareth was the first one. Then Cheap Trick.
Right.
The Guess Who was the last one, which was my favorite up until now, which is this amazing book.
Right. There we go.
Stephen Van Zandt, available in hardcover and paperback from anywhere you want to buy a book, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's readily available.
And if you're in the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, as it's known, within a drive, you can contact Robert on, I guess, on Instagram or Facebook or all the regular ways, and you can get one personalized. Go and buy it from his store at what's the name of the mall?
Cloverdale Mall.
Cloverdale Mall. Sunrise Records at Cloverdale Mall. You can get one and personalized, because as I did here, I'll show you my personalized one here. This is pretty cool. Where'd it go? Well, pal Glenn, keep rocking the basement. Love it. And I even got a bookmark. You got any more of these left?
Yeah. If people order directly from me or come by the shop to get one, I still have some bookmarks. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Excellent. Okay. So I want to ask a question before we get into the book. Is tell us about your journey just getting interested in the music of Stephen Van Zandt. Was it prior to his joining Bruce Springsteen? Like, how far back were a fan, and were you aware of Stephen, and how did that whole musical journey happen for you?
I kind of got into Springsteen like in '81, and into Born to Run and the River album and all the back catalog at that point. So I didn't know too much about his band members, and then I had heard that his guitar player was coming to Toronto in February of '83. I still didn't really know too much of who all the guys in the band were. I didn't care that much. I was just really into, Bruce's albums.
Mhm.
And then Steven was interviewed on the New Music when he was in town for that Toronto appearance. He did 2 shows at the El Macambo,
Oh
uh,
wow.
pretty famous venue, and in Toronto. And so they had this interview with him. I did watch it. I thought he was an interesting guy. And then at the end of it, they played the music video for a song off his. He only had the one album out at the time, but so they played the music video for the song "Forever," and I just thought it was a great Motown pop kind of song. It sounds a lot like "Tears of a Clown" by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and I loved it. So like the next day, I went to my local mall. To a Sam the Record Man, which I ended up being my first record store job a few years later. And I bought the Men Without Women album. And after that, I've just been like obsessed ever since. And when he came to Toronto the next year for his second album, Voice of America, I went to that concert, met him before and after the show.
Oh
And
wow. How did you end up doing that? Just hanging around, or?
it was at the concert hall at Young and Davenport.
Okay.
So it was a general admission venue. So I was there with my friends and my sister, and we're just like sitting on the steps, and we see this like van drive by, and through the tinted windows, you can see that there's a black guy with a big blonde mohawk who's one of the members of Steven's band, Jean Beauvoir. And I saw him, so we ran around the corner. So just when they got out of the van to go get ready for the show, we were just there. So we met them and got stuff signed and everything. And then we were right up at the front of the stage throughout the whole show. And then yeah, at the end, we just waited at that stage entrance again to meet them and talk to them, and we got a few pictures and stuff like that. But so then ever since then, I was just like really into the guy. I love what he was doing musically. I loved hearing him talk. I mean, he's never had the output of my 2 big heroes, who are Bob Dylan and Miles Davis. So it's kind of hard to always say like Steven's my favorite artist, because there was a point where he only had like 4 albums out, whereas those guys have dozens and dozens of albums. But he's just a guy that was always really, really important to me, and that I followed everything that he did. I was always just collecting news articles. He wasn't really talked about quite as much back then, before Sopranos and all that kind of stuff. So I was just really, really into him pretty early on, and then just never lost that passion for following whatever he's been doing. And that led to a point now, all these decades later, where like I'm the guy writing his biography, because who else could, really?
Yeah, that's awesome. So after you kind of got into him in the 80s, do you have to go back and kind of revisit and go back to the early, like the Southside Johnny stuff and everything? Like, then you're going back to the 70s, or is it something that you just?
Yeah, like I was getting into that kind of stuff anyway through the Bruce connection, and then the more that I got into Steven, like I was just like really immersed in that whole scene. So I think in '87 was the first time that I went down to Asbury Park to just check out all the famous kind of venues and things like that. And I used to go down quite often. So I was just like really into all of that, just the whole scene. So I got so into like Bruce that then I was looking into side projects and other things that other people would do. But it didn't take too long for my interest in Steven to go way past my interest in Bruce.
Yeah.
Like Steven's not a guy that I follow because I hope Bruce is going to join on stage tonight. I would actually prefer if Bruce did not join Steven on stage.
Or Steven.
Well, because then they're just going to do like a Springsteen song or something. I want to hear as many Steven songs as I can. And for a long time, Steven wasn't really touring, so you couldn't kind of see him live all that much. That changed in 2017 and 2019, but for a long time there was no real way to see him on his own. So if he does come around, if there's people around in the crowd yelling out for Bruce, like that's just not my scene at all. And that happens. It happens, but that's not my scene at all.
Oh, there's my buddy Sam St. John watching tonight. Americana Sam. Howdy, gents. Just saw Stevie on the Tonight Show with Darlene Love. I saw that yesterday that he was going to be on, and then I totally forgot about it. How
Uh,
was that? How was that?
wow. In a way, I was there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your book. Yeah. One of the band members was reading your book.
Yeah. So Steven's.
You were on the Jimmy Fallon show in kind of,
the current guitar player in the Disciples of Soul, who's also the musical director of the Disciples of Soul, and he's been with Steven now since like 2015, I think. His name's Mark Ribler, and he brought a copy of the book to the Tonight Show. So he was reading it backstage, or he took a photo, or he had somebody take a photo of him reading
so cool.
the book at 30 Rockefeller. Which me and my wife, we do watch the Jimmy Fallon show, and we watch Saturday Night Live, and we always watched all these kind of things. So it was kind of an extra cool thing that when I watched, we watched the show today because we taped it. So watching them on stage, and yeah, they're with Darlene Love and all this, and knowing that my book is in the vicinity.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was
And
something
I see you
new.
reading the book with the Jimmy Fallon Tonight Show sign behind, and that's a really cool shot.
Yeah, it was very, very cool.
That must have been a
And that was
project.
Mark's idea. I had asked him for a photo, possibly of him, with the book, which is what I usually ask a lot of the artists when I send them copies. I'll send them a free copy of the book, and all I ask is for a photo. And most of them will not do that, or they'll agree to it, and they just won't do it. With this book, I'm getting a lot more photos back, which is great. But that was Mark's idea. He actually wrote to me and said, "I'm going to take it to the Tonight Show." I thought, wow, that's going above and beyond for me. So yeah, very, very cool. And there's a bunch of people in that version of the Disciples of Soul who've been with Steven for a long time, who I did interview for the book. So it was neat to see, and some of the current members that I interviewed for the book too. So very cool to see them all together again last night.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think they'll tour again at some point?
I asked Steven that the last time that I interviewed him for the book, and it doesn't seem likely. I don't think so. I think he's more interested in doing television and
Well, I
movies,
guess
maybe.
Bruce, too. If Bruce is going to keep touring the E Street Band, hard not.
Maybe, but I mean, the next E Street dates I think aren't till like April or something. So Steven could do other stuff. I think the current Disciples are really, really strong. I've seen them a few times. It's a great band, and they can play anything from his entire career. Steven's solo albums, he would change the sound a lot from album to album. But the current Disciples that he's had for a few years now, they can do anything in his catalog, and they do it really well. So I hope that he wouldn't lose that opportunity.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see. Because I would love to go see him. If you ever come to Toronto again, I would definitely go. Yeah. Can I ask you about? So, correct me if I'm wrong in describing these books. Like your writing style, I love it because it's not. You could call it a biography, and in some ways it is, but it's not a biography in the sense that people usually read biographies and they read about, the guy's father was a junkie, and then he grew up, and these are all the drugs he took, and these are all the women that he slept with, and it's totally focused on the music, and the story's kind of told chronologically through the music career. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I don't care about that kind of stuff. I never really have.
Yeah.
I used to read a lot of music books. I don't read quite as many of them now because I'm busy writing them. But yeah, I've never liked that kind of stuff.
No, I usually stop if a biography gets too heavy into that stuff. I usually stop reading it. Like I get offended. It gets offensive to me.
Yeah, there was a horrible Elvis biography in the 80s.
Oh,
I did read it.
Goldman?
Yeah.
Goldman, yeah, and he wrote the John Lennon one too, which was
right.
a bad one. Yeah.
So I did force myself to read that Elvis book just because at the time I was like reading every Elvis book I could find, and I read like over 25 or something over a period of 5 years. So I did force myself to read it. But yeah, it was offensive. It was sickening. It was clearly written by somebody who hates Elvis, like just hates everything that he accomplished, hates that he was ever successful, hates that he had any kind of presence in our culture. And I don't know why you would do that. I don't know what kind of person, what would make you do that.
I don't know either.
But I'm trying not to be that kind of person, and I definitely have no interest in those kind of stories.
So reading the book, the way you write it, gets me the point is the freaking research that's done for this. I can't even imagine. Like, how can you talk about researching this book? Because the detail, and it flows so beautifully, and it's all like pertinent and interesting. It's like, just I can't. As I'm reading it, I'm overwhelmed, just going, how the hell do you know this stuff? Like,
That's what Steven said to me.
you got to tell us. You got to tell us something about how you do this. Were you born with a gene or something that gives
you? Maybe. Yeah, maybe some obsessive compulsive fact combing gene. It's just kind of I think of myself as someone who's fairly organized, and I try to have organized thoughts. And so it's just a matter of really having everything in the right place and having, all the information. It's kind of handy the way that I do it, that each chapter is breaking down by an album. So I just take each album and get to as many sources as I can for that one topic, and as many, like I go through hours and hours of like newspapers.com, which is like archives of, hundreds of thousands of newspapers all over the world. So I can just go combing through that for like hours and hours. I'm going to find every review of a concert tour that he did. I went through pages and pages of the Red Bank Reader, I think is the New Jersey newspaper for Monmouth County in New Jersey. And you just start seeing like his name showing up. Like it's just a small kind of community newspaper. So they do a little blurb that for his, I forget now what it is. It's like for his 10th birthday that him and his family went out for a pasta dinner. And like that's it. That's in the newspaper. But I also found other stuff when I was looking through. There's a lot of interviews with Steven where he'll say, like, I wasn't a very good student. I didn't care about high school. I didn't care about grades. I was a misfit. I didn't fit in. And I'm sure all that is true of how he feels or how he felt at the time. But the newspaper back then, they would publish the honor roll at the end of every graduation year. So his grades were like in the top like 95% or something, so I was able to go through and find all these years where he was actually either on the honor roll or the roll right beneath it. And I find out that he was in a couple of school plays. So he was a little more involved in the school culture than he kind of remembers, which is fine. And, like I'm not calling him a liar or anything, like our memories from a long time ago. But he did point out to me that, and this is why what he said is still true, that just once he got into music and got into bands, everything changed. So, he said, yeah, I guess I was a pretty good student, like now that you say that, but that still just didn't compare to how exciting life got once I started getting into bands and playing with other people. So he's not necessarily wrong to say that like his memories that he didn't quite fit in as a student, but then, his grades were actually pretty good.
Well, I think also you start thinking that he from reading the book and how busy this man is, he probably was just the kind of guy who could just work, get some grades somewhat effortlessly. Like he's busy. This guy's had a busy life. He's not sitting around on the couch.
No, and there's a point where he became a really heavy reader as well. So he's very well read on a lot of not only political issues, but spiritual things. So, he's like, when you talk to him or you read interviews with him, he's obviously very intelligent. So it's not like, maybe the high school thing. I mean, a lot of people memories of high school are not that great. So maybe he's just looking back on it in kind of a way. like that. But yeah, it's not like he never became, really knowledgeable or educated on a lot of topics. It's true he didn't go to college or university after high school because his life was all about performing in bands. But that's just one example of the research. I mean, that's what you're asking. But going forward from that, yeah, I just really kind of try to pick apart as much different areas for each chapter, whether that's talking to his longtime guitar tech, Ben Newberry, who's a friend of mine, or going through, like I say, old newspapers. Because I'm such a huge Stephen fan, I actually have a lot of raw data already. I've got a giant binder that I was always cutting out newspaper reviews of albums and concert reviews from the Toronto Star, the Toronto Sun, the Globe and Mail, anything like that. If I saw his name in print in Rolling Stone or a little mention of something, like his wedding was covered by Rolling Stone magazine and they printed one photo, that immediately got cut out and put into the binder. So I had a lot of raw data. I've got a filing cabinet here that's just full of not just Steven. It's got like a lot of different bands and artists and stuff where I just keep, like I say, raw data. So I just have information about different discographies and careers. So it's not too difficult to at least have a good starting point of, I could pull out, there's a whole folder here just for Pink Floyd The Wall, So if I ever wanted to do something about Pink Floyd The Wall, there's a lot of, this is like one.
Oh, that's crazy. That's awesome.
So, when you already have a lot of this material, it's kind of good. It's a way to start putting it together. And then as I started talking to more musicians who played with him, and then of course my interviews with him were a real significant game changer for the book.
So how did you become from being just an average Joe fan to making connections with Stephen and people that knew him and played with him and whatever? Like, how does that all come about?
I think it's just like,
who are you to a guy in New Jersey? You know what I mean?
Right. Who am I to a guy anywhere?
Yeah.
I think just from being so into his music, and so after a while, people on his team start to get to know me. He used to have a personal there. Well, there used to be a woman in New Jersey named Holly Cara Price, and she was a huge Stephen fan. She used to publish a fanzine devoted to him. So I hooked up with her and I started doing some album reviews and even illustrations in her zine. And then eventually she started working for him. So she would bring me backstage if he was in town, and she got us together many times.
Oh, awesome. That's nice.
So, and then, from there, yeah, you're sort of just, they know of me, they kind of, they know there's that guy in Canada. So like when they were putting together his box set a few years ago,
which I wasn't even aware of. I didn't even realize there is a box set.
Yeah, Rock and Roll Rebel. It's a CD and a vinyl box. Although I think the vinyl doesn't have quite as much music as the CD DVD version of it. Yeah, they reached out to me for some information while they're putting that box set together. And then when he was writing his autobiography, they actually reached out to me again. There was a few things that they needed to clarify. So, so I'm just sort of, known a little bit as that guy. So was it last year now? He reunited the Disciples of Soul to do 2 shows in Red Bank, New Jersey, so that they could be filmed for the upcoming, well, it's out now, documentary on HBO called Disciple. So I flew down for the second show, and that was where I pitched the book idea to him backstage.
That's my next question. Did you pitch the book idea to him before you did it?
Well, I'd already started it. I've been working on it for about 3 years at that point. So it was going ahead regardless. And I'd already interviewed a bunch of people. There were some people who were waiting to see if Stephen would approve if they talked to me, which is fine. I mean, that happens sometimes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. And I kind of figured he would, because once I kind of reintroduced myself to him and told him what the point of the book was, I figured he would not have a problem with it. So when I met him backstage in Red Bank at the Count Basie Theater, I just gave him a real quick, like a 2-minute, 4-minute, pitch. And right away he said, "What do you need me to do?" So it was that easy. I mean, he knew who I was. I think he knew that that's what I wanted to talk to him about. So from there, we arranged a Zoom meeting, I think in January of this year, and then we did a follow up like in March. And the January one was like 2 hours or maybe a little bit more, and then the follow up one was like 90 minutes or something. It added up to like 4 hours or something.
Wow.
I don't remember exactly now, but of us just going over a lot of different areas. And he was totally open to it. When we started the first interview, he said, I've cleared my day. You have as much time as you need. Let's get into it.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Wow. Isn't that nice to hear?
Well, I think he knew
support from the artist.
Well, he knew, and I actually warned him that I was going to be talking about some things that he never really gets asked about, and things that, I knew he wouldn't know the answers to a lot of the things because they're so obscure and so long ago. But I told him, like, that's what we're going to get into, and he probably felt a little refreshed about that. I can tell you, I started the first. I didn't realize I still had this here. I started the very first Zoom interview with him by showing him this, and this is in the book.
Is that an original photograph?
No, this is just a printout.
A print, okay.
But this is like his very first band, and it's him on guitar, and he's got a drummer and an accordion player, and he had no memory of what this was. He didn't know who they were. He admitted that it was him.
Really? And he doesn't know the other guys.
He once when I told him, then he remembered them, but he didn't remember playing them, and he actually was surprised because his memory was that when he first saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, he became just a singer in some groups in his high school, and then it was only like a year or more later that he started playing guitar. Well, this proves that he actually was playing guitar way sooner than what he remembered. So that was a good way to break the ice and to show him, well, this is the level of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you doing something that you don't even remember. So that really cleared that cleared us to be able to get into like a lot of stuff. And there was a lot of times I'd be asking him stuff, and he would just shake his head and go, "How do you know this?" Or or a name that he doesn't remember because he hasn't, maybe there's somebody he hasn't worked with in 40 years, so he hasn't really thought of them that much. But that doesn't mean I don't think of them, because I still listen to that music from 40 years ago. So I'm mentioning all kinds of people and things that, so he appreciated that level of detail as well.
Wow, that's crazy. Did getting access to band members and guys like that, were they pretty the same thing? Did you have meetings with these guys, or was it just email type things, or how was that all?
I always go with whatever the artist is most comfortable with. So if they want to do it over the phone, we do it over the phone. If they want to do a Zoom or email or anything, whatever is going to make it easier, I'll accommodate them.
Yeah.
I think that's the most respectful way to approach it. And some people, like Burton Cummings, when I did my Guess Who book, I mean, I've known Burton for a long time, but he likes email because he likes to think of his answers, and he has actually a very good memory for Guess Who stuff and for stuff from his solo career. So he likes email, so he can really think of his answer and really give it some thought, not just something off the top of his head. But other guys, especially when you get some of these older rocker dudes, they might not be quite as good with Zoom or even email, frankly. So some of them, we do it over the phone. And there was a couple of guys who, like I said, they kind of waited to see if Steven was okay with it. Mark Ribler, that guitar player who brought my book to the Tonight Show, he was one. Eddie Mannion, who played saxophone in Southside Johnny and Asbury Jukes. He plays currently with the E Street Band. He was with the Disciples of Soul in 82 and 83, and he's in this 2017, 2019 Disciples of Soul. He's he's been in this New Jersey scene forever. He was another one. He was very cautious and just said, well, unless Steven. And then he saw me talking to Steven backstage at the Count Basie. Next thing you know, him and I are having a drink at the hotel bar. And he's like, yeah, ask me anything. Like all they just want to make sure, as soon as the boss, in this case Steven, says it's okay, then let's do it. And there were a couple of other guys who took me a really long time to get. There's a keyboard player named Rusty Cloud, and he used to play with Gary U.S. Bonds, and he was with Little Steven in '82, and then he left to be with Southside Johnny and Asbury Jukes. And he's just a guy that I always loved, and he's a little bit of a character. I met him once in New Jersey years ago, and like years and years ago. So he was a guy I really wanted, even though his input into Steven's story is kind of small. It took me like over a year to get Rusty Cloud, but felt so good to get him. Jean Beauvoir was another one. He was the bass player in '82, '83, and he moved over to guitar in '84. I really wanted him involved. Took a while to get some of these guys, but I got almost everybody, that I wanted. I didn't reach.
I just aren't associated with Little Steven either. Like they, I think I was reading the book. I forget. Guys couldn't, they couldn't tour with him at certain times because they were going out on tour with some heavyweight artists. Like I'm trying to remember the name of the female art. There was one big female artist. Was it? It wasn't like Whitney Hughes. It was like a big name at the time. I can't remember.
Oh, Diana Ross.
Yeah, Diana Ross. Yeah.
Yeah, when the Horns were first, it's like I think they were taking a break from Diana Ross in '82, so they did the album with Steve, and then they were able to do some dates, and then they kind of had to figure out what they wanted to do, which gig they were going to do. So that's kind of cool that you can see photos online of Diana Ross like on tour in like '80 or '81, and it's what are known as now the Miami Horns were her horn section.
Yeah.
So that's Eddie Mannion and Mark Pender and a guy they call La Bamba, Richie Rosenberg. Mark Pender and La Bamba went on for years. They were the horn section on the Conan O'Brien band with Max Weinberg. So
wow. I mean,
so those guys been around for years. Yeah,
that's heavyweight stuff. That's not tour with Diana Ross and unless you've got some kind of a.
Well, all those guys do lots of sessions on the side.
Yeah.
Like I said, Eddie Mannion, I think for years he was playing with Mink DeVille, and he also played with Robert Cray. These guys do other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's somebody who was an Asbury Juke, was a disciple of Soul, played with Gary U.S. Bonds, is a member of the E Street Band, that's someone you kind of want to talk to.
Now, just going from Gary, you ended up interviewing Gary U.S. Bonds too, right?
I got Gary really close to the end of the project, like really, really close to the end. And, he's a much older gentleman now. And I didn't want to take up too much of his time. And I try to be respectful of that kind of stuff. So that's an example of where we talked via email. And, Steven produced 2 albums for him in the early '80s with Bruce.
Well, it resurrected his career, right? Because he was a 50s, early '60s hits guy. I'm trying to remember his big hits from the early days.
Quarter to Three.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
And then sometime in the '80s, because I remember when it was happening, was that Steven was involved with. I think even Bruce was involved with. Resurrecting his career. And then did Steven produce his albums or?
Yeah, there's 2 albums that Steven and Bruce kind of co-produced, and the band on those records are a mix of Gary's touring band as well as the E Street Band and various Asbury Jukes or Disciples of Soul. Those records were kind of recorded around the same time, or they bookend the recording of Steven's first album. So they have the same sound, they have the same feel. If you go from The River to Gary's Dedication album, to Steven's Men Without Women album, to Gary's On the Line album, those 4, they all have the same sound. And I think they were all done mostly at the Power Station in New York. They have the same feel, same musicians. So those Gary albums are an important part, I think, of Steven's history. But Yeah, I only had a few questions for Gary, and it was almost more just so I could just say that Gary was involved in the book. Just, I didn't want to really press him with, trying to dig up some memories from, 45 years ago,
Yeah.
when he's like I think he's in his mid to late 80s now himself. But yeah, getting him involved was nice. That was very nice. I'm very happy to.
Were there
To get
people that you couldn't get to? Like he was on stage last night with Darlene Love. I know he's had a connection with her for many, many years. So would you ever try? Did you try and reach out to people like that too, or?
I don't think I tried Darlene Love, although that it was suggested to me a few times. I probably should have. Um, I only kind of thought recently that I probably should have reached out to Gary Talent. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't.
None of
He's
you didn't reach out to any of the East Readers?
no, no. Um, I was told like,
Well, because the book really doesn't focus on that.
yeah, not really.
Very little.
I mean, Gary Talent is the primary bass player on Steven's first solo album.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays on those Gary S. Bonds albums. So it would be more kind of about that. I probably should have. I probably should have tried Gary Talent. But yeah, there was a few people I couldn't get. A lot of them maybe more obscure to the whole story because I like talking to a lot of people who most people don't talk to. If you watch the HBO documentary, which is great.
I haven't get a chance to see it because I don't have HBO, but I'd love to see it.
Well, Steven invited me to go down to see the premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival.
Wow.
So I saw it down there, and since then I've become, or I guess before I went there, I've become friends with the director Bill Tech and one of the producers Rob Cotto. So I talk to those guys all the time, or quite often anyway. But one of the things that Bill and I have talked about together is his documentary, because it's an HBO production and it's a pretty big deal. You're seeing interviews with Paul McCartney and Bono and Jackson Brown and Peter Gabriel and Bruce and I don't know, Eddie Vedder, all these big people. Most of the people in my book are not in that documentary.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking to people who really rarely get talked to. So a guy, like I say, Rusty Cloud, Eddie Mannion, Mark Pender,
Yeah,
La
the average music
Bamba.
listener would not know these people's names, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think those names are a real important part of the story. And I think the fact that they don't get to talk all that often makes them even more reliable, because they're not just repeating the same stories that they've said, a million times. Sometimes when I watch these interviews with an artist just saying the same thing.
Oh, Paul McCartney's got his story down like it
Right.
word for word. It never changes.
Yeah. So it's like, are you actually telling the story of what happened, or are you just remembering the story that you told about what happened? And so yeah, for me, talking to, like, in 1986, Stephen appeared at Giant Stadium. There was a huge Amnesty International benefit concert, and it was broadcast on television, on MTV in the States. And like U2 performed, and a lot of big names. So Stephen did a very short set, but he had a very unique band. There was like 15 or 16 people on stage, and it took me years to figure out who they all were. And there were still like 3 or 4 guys that, even when I started writing the book, that I just never knew who these guys were. And I just kept digging and digging. So I talked to a couple of those guys who, they've never been asked about the amnesty. That was literally one appearance. But to me, it was one pretty important appearance, because it was at a time where Stephen wasn't really in the spotlight too much. His third album hadn't come out yet, and wouldn't come out for another year. And here he is on playing a packed Giant Stadium, which is, I don't know, like 75,000 people or something, and it's broadcast all over the world. So yeah, I want to talk to the guy who was playing rhythm guitar and got to play a little bit of lead. And there was a percussionist that I didn't know who he was, but so reaching out to a lot of those guys, you might not get
good stories to tell.
Yeah, and you might not get a huge revelation or a huge like chunk of information, but you'll just get enough kind of like little bits that, to me, it helps having a lot of different voices. So I would write the structure of the book that you were talking about originally. I would have that format of chapter by chapter, and I just keep filling in. I do write chronologically, so I have it all set up, and then all of a sudden, if I get in touch with the guitar player from the '86 Amnesty, I could just get a couple of his quotes and fit them in there. So I just keep. It's almost like I almost look at it like the kind of sculpture. I'm building stuff. I keep adding pieces. So to me, the piece was looking pretty good with all these different things. And then when I did that first Zoom with Steven, like I said, like 2 hours or something, I got all these big chunks to add to almost every chapter. And that just changed the whole feel of the book, because originally maybe you have me talking about a certain event, whether it's a show or an album or a single, then maybe a little quote from one of the horn guys, a little quote from the roadie who used to do the percussion and drums. And that's pretty good. And I'm pretty happy with that. And then I had a thing from Steven, and it really, really took it to another level. And when I added those parts after the first interview with Steven, I was really happy with how the book was coming along. I said, okay, now we got something here. Now we got something real special. So after adding all those bits, getting my notes together to do a follow-up interview with him, which he didn't understand. He was like, what more do you need to know? Like, we've talked about things that I've never talked about before. And I said, well, I do have a few more areas I want to touch upon. And so once I got all that stuff, then then the book's in like really, really good shape. And I'm probably most happy with this book because of that kind of thing, that there's so many other voices. There's a chapter on the Sun City record from 1985 where I got some really good quotes from the co-producer, a guy named Arthur Baker. And I was really happy to get him. And I only really got him because after the first interview with Steven, he asked me about that. He said, what do you mean? You haven't talked to Arthur Baker? Like, you should really get him involved. I said, all right. If Steven says I should talk to Arthur Baker, I'm going to talk to Arthur Baker.
Yeah. And then also now you can go to Arthur Baker and say, hey, Steven said I should talk to you.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And that's what I did. I was also able to send to people the photo of me and Steven together when I pitched it to him in Red Bank. So that helped too. Like, I could actually pinpoint, like, hey, last night I talked to Steve and here we are, and he agreed. Yeah. So with the Arthur Baker thing, what was really neat, even to me, like the Sun City chapter, I thought it looked real good. I was really happy with it. Then I had these Arthur Baker quotes. I'm like, man, that's 1 + 1 = 3 here. But then I went back to Steven and mentioned some of the Arthur Baker stuff, and that triggered some memories with him. So then when I put his stuff in there, when you read it, it almost looks like they're talking to each other, but they're both talking to me at separate times. But, like Arthur might end with saying, like, but I don't know if Steven remembers it the way that I do. And then the Steven quote starts with, well, what I remember is actually, and, it really flows. So I think that elevated the book a lot. So even though there was a few people that I didn't get to talk to, a few people that I should have talked to, I got no regrets about all the people who are involved. I mean, Steven obviously is very high on the list of someone you want involved, but I think in total I interviewed like almost 40 people, so that's a pretty good bench depth
for sure. Yeah. Well, that's why, because I think one of the things you excel at is the way your books flow. They flow just absolutely beautifully. And it's funny when you start talking about how you, after the fact, now you got to piece this and piece that, and it kind of changed your, the way the chapter was coming out, and you did that well, because the whole, like, all your books are like that, but this one, it's exceptionally, it just flows just unbelievably well.
I'm really, really happy with it. Really happy with it. So
yeah, I just loved it. I gotta say, it's 10 out of 10. It was great. I couldn't put it down. I just want to get a few people here have made comments, and let's Blackball Chris. Robert's working habits are inspirational. File folders with raw data. Love it. I love that too. I'm thinking, as you're telling me that, I'm thinking that, why didn't I spend my years doing that? Robert, what do you think of Little Steven's Underground Garage radio shows? I hear it every day.
I think it's exceptional work that he does. I was backstage with him in it was on the Rising tour, so on 2002 or something. It was backstage in San Jose, California. I was at a show, and it was really interesting because the radio show had only been around for a couple years, I think, at that point. So a lot of people in the backstage area were actually radio guys, uh, reps from radio stations and stuff who were there to pitch him ideas. And I think I was one of the only people kind of there who wanted to talk about his music. So the radio show's been going on for a long time now, and I think it's really great work that he does in terms of introducing new bands. But he also plays like a lot of the old bands. I think he plays like the Ramones like every day or something, or like the MC5 and Dave Clark 5 and all that kind of stuff. So it's a real educational thing for people who love current music and classic kind of rock and garage rock and psychedelic stuff to really, learn it. So if younger people who are just into the Hives and the Strokes and I don't know, White Stripes and Black Keys and stuff like that, maybe they don't know that much about the earlier groups like say Dave Clark 5. And then there's always the older rockers who think there's no good new music now. And I think the radio show really brings that together, like to hear that stuff. And he's got like Michael DeBears is like a DJ on his station now, who was in Detective, and he was in the Power Station group, and he's I think that's a really interesting world for Steven to spread that love of his music and of music history specifically.
And I know he was a big fan of the Rascals, and was he involved in kind of resurrecting their career too? Like I didn't know until I read the book that Dino Danelli, the drummer from the Rascals, played with Steven.
Yeah, so Dino Danelli was the drummer from 82, 83, 84.
Yeah.
And he also did some of the art design on Steven's first 3 albums. Dino had a bit of a side, like an illustration background or something. So he was designing like the logo for the song titles on the back of the records and stuff. So Dino Danelli and Felix, the keyboardist, vocalist in the Rascals, they both appear on the first Steven album, Men Without Women.
It was Cavallari, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There was a big Rascals. It was like a reunion tour, but they made it into
a Broadway thing or something, or that he was involved with, or did some kind of show.
It was on Broadway. It actually played in Toronto as well.
Yeah.
So the Rascals, I didn't go to see it. I don't know why, but they would show like on the screens pieces of their history, and then the Rascals would come out and perform some songs live, and then they would talk a little bit, and then it would go back to the screens, and it was a whole like multimedia thing of presenting the Rascals history while having the original members there performing. And I really wish I'd seen it. I don't know why I didn't. Steven was even here in Toronto for the premiere, and I don't know, I didn't go.
Wow.
I don't know what I was doing at that time. I might not have had that much free time or something.
We got some kind of upside down happy face. Just saw Springsteen Easter Band in November. First time ever. Max and Steven were lights out.
I don't know, anyone who's got a picture of Kurt Winter as their avatar there, I'm interested in. Nice.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, look at that. Wiley's Music Corner. That's crazy.
Shout out to Kurt Winter, one of the greatest guitar players to come out of Winnipeg.
You were at one of the recent Springsteen shows in Toronto, right?
Yeah, I went to the first night. I was there. It was a Sunday night, and that's where my wife and I were backstage before the show, and I was able to present a copy of the book to Steven, which he knew I wanted to do. We had talked about it. So that was I had sent him a PDF of the finished book, and I guess he looked through it a little bit, but I actually was able to give him a copy, as well as he signed my personal copy. And yeah,
did you sign his personal copy?
I did, yeah. Yeah, and I only had the paperbacks at that time. So then a week later, I think I got the hardcovers, and I sent him down a signed hardcover as well. So he's got both formats. But that was cool. He was flipping through it, and he said to one of his personal assistants, like, I don't remember, or I don't know half the stuff that's in this book. And
That's a compliment.
it was good. It was good to see him again. After the 2 lengthy Zoom interviews, that we were actually able to, to be in person again, and yeah, to give him the book and get a photo of him with the book and all that. That was really important. Like I said, with some of the other books, it's almost impossible to get photos of the artists with them.
How are these guys back? I mean, they're putting on a big show in front of a ton of people. How relaxed is Steven Van Zandt before he's going on stage? Are they pretty?
He's very relaxed.
Is that kind of cool, or?
He's done it a million times. He's been.
Yeah, I know, but still, it's
Well, my wife actually pointed out when we got home, because she was videotaping her with her camera, and she only noticed later, or pointed out to me later, that in the footage when I walk up to him and he goes, "Oh, my man," and then we start talking, that above us there's a digital clock on the wall, and I think the clock says like 6:58, and they were going on stage at 7:30. So it's real tight.
Yeah.
real tight before he had to go on stage in front of, a packed arena of 18,000 people or whatever. So it was pretty tight. We only had maybe 5 minutes or 8 minutes, maybe not even that long. But we got to say a few things to each other about the book, and he was really happy that it actually has been completed. And I mean, of course, it was always going to be, but yeah, that was a nice moment.
How impressed was he with the cover? Because the cover is fantastic.
Yeah, he loved the cover. I sent him.
I don't know if this does it justice when you hold it up on a YouTube screen or whatever, but man, it just pops when you got it in your hand. Beautiful.
I'd sent him a PDF of the cover long before the book came out, just so he could see it. So what we have, this is kind of interesting, I guess. So the live photo of him is from that concert in Red Bank, New Jersey, that I saw, and the cover photo was taken from by my friend Ken Lesnick. I'm standing right next to him when he took this photo.
Wow!
So that's from that specific concert, and then I had the idea of adding the merch kind of stuff at the bottom, and a friend of mine here in Ontario, Clive Palmer, is one who brought all the elements together and took what's a great live photo, and to me made an exceptional design. All these, the album in the background and all these things are Clive's design principles. So those 2 guys, having those 2 guys on my team, really makes the cover great. And I agree. I think it looks amazing. I'm really happy with how it came out.
Hold that up in some kind of promo poster or something.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking I would like to do something like that. I have a bunch of music books in my collection that I like that have terrible book covers, like really bad covers, and I don't know why somebody wouldn't take that kind of seriously, of what the original book's going to look like. And especially in hardcover, like the one that you have, I think the colors really pop.
Yeah, incredible
on that hardcover.
It's just an awesome cover.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it.
This is one of my regular viewers, Robert. This book, interesting. Hopefully, I'll buy it soon. Glenn, thanks for this stream and interview. Well, let's thank Robert for doing this. Rachel. Rachel has one of the great channels on YouTube. Does a live show every morning from the West Coast. Stop everything and watch my CD tag response. Yay! Oh, she's thanks, Rachel, for doing that, and thanks for watching. Emma from a channel called 8 Vinyl Low. Emma's awesome. She has a great channel too, and she's a big fan of Steven Van Zandt and Bruce Springsteen. So, hey, Glenn. Hey, Robert. Love Robert's work. Great chat. Awesome. Have a great chat, guys. Dinner time here. Poof. Well, thanks, Rachel. Promote the interview for me. Wondering if any of Robert's subject interviewees share his passion for craft beer. Nice hat, by the way. I know Burton has previously expressed his fondness of Newcastle Brown and Rickards even. So tell us about your passion for craft beer.
Well, it's funny to mention Burton in that, because Burton often gives me the gears about all the pictures of beer that I post on social media, because Burton likes actually, I don't know if he drinks that much anymore, but for a while Newcastle Brown Ale is like one of his big favorites. So I post a lot of stuff that's like Ontario craft breweries that I support, and every once in a while there'll be in my comments on Facebook, there'll be a comment from Burton saying, "Lawson, what are you doing? Stop drinking these weird, hazy IPAs. Get Newcastle Brown Ale
Yeah.
or something." I actually went to a couple of LCBOs, the liquor stores here in Ontario. This was a couple years ago. I thought I'm going to get a bottle of Newcastle Brown Ale just so I can post it, just so I can
Yeah.
tell Burton, here, I'm finally, drinking the beer that you want me to drink. But I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it at that time, and maybe
Really?
the joke's too old now. But yeah, in Ontario right now, there's a great scene for craft beer. A lot of independently owned breweries are in Toronto and in the Ontario area, and I love them. I think they do great work. They do a lot of community stuff. They raise money for women's shelters and children's hospital stuff. It's just a great scene, and it's a neat thing to get involved in. That you think all these different craft brewers would be like competition for each other or something. It's not that way at all. They're all like friends. They all know each other, and you can go to a brewery like Left Field or Rorschach in the East End, or Great Lakes or Bellwoods. I mean, Blood Brothers. There's all kinds of them. There's dozens, and often you'll see somebody from another brewery sitting at the bar having a pint. So it's this really nice kind of warm
Yeah.
feeling
That's
about
cool.
them. So
I don't. You just can't put fruit in my beer. I don't like the fruity beers.
right.
I can't do that. It's like poutine. Don't put cheese in my French fries.
Jesus, man.
And yes, Kurt is one of my heroes. Right on. Is Wiley from Winnipeg by any chance? Is he a friend of yours, Robert? Do you know?
No, I don't know him.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks for joining us, Wiley. That's pretty cool.
But I'm glad I know him now.
Yeah.
Any fan of Kurt Winters is a friend of mine.
Wiley, have you read Robert's book on the Guess Who?
Right, that's the question.
I'd be interested in knowing that. Now, just going back to that book, because we were talking about people gaining access to people and getting Stephen on board. You told me we did your talk on the Guess Who book when it came out, and you told me that Randy Bachman was not enamored with your book. Like he didn't want to have any part of it.
Well, he originally he was going to be interviewed for it. We talked about it. He knew about it. I pitched it to him the same day that I pitched it to Burton, and they were both on board immediately. So our email communications went well as we tried to figure out a time when we could do it. And then at the end, he backed out quite quickly. He was given some. I mean, I don't mind talking about it. It's not a positive story, but he was given some bad information from somebody. There was someone who didn't want the Guess Who book to come out, who thought I shouldn't be writing a book about the Guess Who because I'm nobody, I was told by this person. So this person knew that Burton wanted to do it and knew he couldn't convince Burton not to do it. So this person told me, you can't do it unless you have both. You need both these guys or you have to cancel the book. So this guy put a lot of ideas in Randy's head about my book and about my intentions, and Randy believed him. Even though my pitch is always what you started the conversation with an hour ago, that it's all about the music. It's not about groupies or AA or any drama or gossip. It's really a strict look at the albums and the recording sessions and all that. That never changes. That's always my format, and that's always my pitch. So when I said that to Randy backstage, he was all in. he was all in. And there had only been one previous book about the Guess Who, written by a guy in Winnipeg, music historian named John Einerson. And I said that to Randy, there's only the John Einerson book. And Randy did this karate chop, and he said, and that book ends in the 90s. So everything since then hasn't been talked about. I was like, Randy, I'm going to talk about all that stuff. So he was totally on board. We had some really good emails back and forth. And then I was supposed to meet him before a Casino-Rama show that he was doing. But, like I said, this one person didn't want the book to come out. Thought that I was the wrong person to do it, and convinced Randy that the book was going to be full of gossip and that it wasn't going to tell the real story, and that I wasn't going to talk to Jim Cale, the bass player, and Gary Peterson, the drummer, so it wouldn't be the full story, just a bunch of garbage. And I really wish that Randy had, I responded to him when he said he wouldn't do it. And I said, can we talk about this? Because my pitch is correct. Everything that I said the book would be about, that's what it's about. And if I don't talk to Jim Cale and Gary Peterson, well, first of all, they're not songwriters in the Guess Who, so it's probably not that big a deal. I did go on to talk to Gary Peterson. So it's really unfortunate that Randy believed somebody who did not have his own best interests at heart. This guy was just like manipulating me out of doing something, which was going to happen even if Burton didn't sign up for the Guess Who book. At that point, by the time I talked to the main artist, the book is like 90% done. Like all it's missing is their input. So the book's going to come out anyway. So it was just really unfortunate that Randy believed that. He believed a bunch of nonsense, because I think that the book is a little uneven, that I didn't get, a little bit of input from Randy. Although with him, you got to really watch it, because his memory is so bad. And when he doesn't know something, he doesn't say he doesn't know it. He makes up something. So I knew that having Randy could be problematic anyway. But I still wanted him to be part of it. That's why I pitched it to him. And he got played. He totally got played. And when I said, can we talk about this? He didn't respond to me. He had his manager at the time send me an email saying, Randy he wants nothing to do with this. And please don't reach out to him again. He doesn't want to discuss, what happened and what he was told and anything. So at that point, I go, well,
it's just, hey, it's done.
Randy's out, and it's too bad. But the book would only show my respect for his part in Guess Who history. I mean, I love his songwriting with the Guess Who, and I love his guitar playing on those early Guess Who albums. So,
Wow. There we go. Blackball Chris. This interview has been a treat. Great conversation, Robert and Glenn. I have to get this book. You do have to get this book.
I agree.
Yeah, everybody has to get this book. Again, available from pretty much anywhere you buy books from, right?
Yeah, like Amazon has it. In Canada, they're selling it for a pretty high price, and I got to talk to my publisher about it again. I don't know why it's so high on Amazon.ca, but Amazon.com, if any of your viewers are in the States or internationally. Some guy in the Netherlands just got a copy the other day.
Wow.
But Indigo Books in Canada, they'll order it in for you, and Barnes & Noble in the States, it's part of their database. Whether they stock it on their shelves, that's up to, I think, each individual store manager. But it is in their database that you can order it from those retailers.
Interesting. Does Sonic Boom in Toronto have it?
No, they do.
It's a big independent record store in Toronto.
Yeah, they don't. They did have I don't know if they had my first book or the first two books on consignment, and it was okay. The consignment thing is a little iffy, because the store ends up making the majority of the money. But if you're in Toronto, my store's in Etobicoke, which isn't too far. I was just going to say,
Chris, if you're in Toronto, make the trip out to Cloverdale Mall, and
or if you're in
Robert and get a copy.
If you're in the Bathurst and Eglinton area, or Yonge and Eglinton, we can do a local pickup too. I mean, you can name a local brew pub, and I'll meet you there.
Robert can be bought for a price of a beer. It sounds like. Wow, that's awesome. What else I going to say? Um, what about Steven's TV career? Did you get in there? There is the last couple of chapters. We get into Lilyhammer and Sopranos. Was there any
Yeah,
cool stories about the Sopranos? I mean, it's the greatest TV show in the history of TV, as far as I'm concerned.
sure. Yeah, there's a whole chapter on Sopranos. I mean, I do focus on Steven's part in the
Yeah, of
Sopranos,
course, of course.
and with Lilyhammer's the same thing. But
Tell us about how Steven ended up getting the role, because you know, if you think about their auditioning people for the parts, how
of
does
what's
Steve Van
for
Zandt become a soprano? Or a
oh yeah, yeah,
member of the family?
yeah. You want me to tell that story?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's so this goes back to the Rascals again. The Rascals were getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you can see his induction speech on YouTube. It's around, because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame broadcasts their inductions on television. So he did this funny speech where he was kind of being a character and being a New Jersey Italian kind of wise guy. And David Chase, the creator of Sopranos at the time, he was watching television somewhere, I guess like from a hotel in LA or something. And he was just really taken with Steven's kind of his comedy, but also just his mannerisms and his physicality and just everything about him. So he reached out to Steven to get for Steven to audition for his new show. And I know originally Steven didn't want to do it because he's not an actor and he doesn't really have much of a history with that kind of thing outside of like music videos maybe. But he went for it. And they had to create a new character for him. The Silvio Dante character did not exist in the original concept of The
Oh, wow.
Sopranos. So Chase wanted him in so bad. He auditioned originally for the Tony Soprano character.
Oh, really?
Which a lot of people did. I mean, they auditioned
Yeah.
a lot of people. There's a reel that I saw recently on Twitter, which I kind of wish I'd seen when I was writing the book, but it's like a 10-minute reel of like 20 or 15 different people auditioning for Tony Soprano. And some of them are guys who then went on to be other characters on Sopranos, and some of them are just like pretty well-known Italian American actors. But Steven's one of them. But because he didn't have really any acting experience, HBO weren't totally comfortable with him being the lead in this new show. So they created the Silvio Dante character for him, and I think I like that character for him better because
Yeah.
it mirrors his role in the E Street Band, where he's like the second lieutenant
I never thought of that.
and he's advising like the main guy, which
Yeah.
is his role. His official role in the E Street Band is musical director. And there's photos you can sometimes see online of him like just rehearsing with the backing vocalists and kind of conducting them and doing the same thing with the horn guys. Some of those horn guys have been with him for a long time, so he's got a real relationship with them. And when you watch him on stage with the E Street Band, to me, I've always felt like he was doing that anyway. Like when Bruce is really involved with the crowd over here, Steven's one who will turn around to the band and kind of give them some cues of what they're going to do. So in Sopranos, he's the one that Tony goes to for advice or just like a sounding board, someone just to bounce ideas off of. So I really like that correlation between the Miami Steve character in the E Street Band and Silvio Dante character on Sopranos.
I never even thought of associating with those, but that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. Amazing. What do you think? Okay, so you talk about his role in the E Street Band. His first album with the E Street Band, where he was actually a member of the band, was Darkness on the Edge of Town. Am I correct?
Yeah, and he has a production assistant credit on that album.
Yeah. So how do you feel that Bruce's sound changed from Born to Run to Darkness? Like when Born to Run album came out, I didn't buy it, and I heard it at a friend's house, and I thought, oh, that's a cool album, but it for some reason didn't resonate with me right away. And but Darkness, as soon as it came out, I bought it, and that was the whole sound for me. Like, do you think it changed Bruce's?
I don't know.
More of a guitar-driven band.
Yeah, I don't know specifically if Steven caused that to happen. I guess he kind of did, because it's obvious that the sound from on those two albums is so different. Born to Run has a big, it's got a horn section, it's got big strings, it's got a lot of overdubs. Whereas on Darkness, it's just
It's
the E
almost
Street Band.
cinematic, but Born to
Yeah,
Run.
sure. Whereas Darkness is just those, what, 6 or 7 guys of the E Street Band. There's no utility players, there's no session people, there's no backing, female backing vocalists brought in to sweeten the spots or anything like that. So it did toughen up the sound a lot. But I thought it was important in the book to mention that going way, way back before the E Street Band, there used to be a group called the Bruce Springsteen Band. And Steven and Bruce, there's lots of audio on YouTube that you can find, and I mentioned a few highlights in the book where Steven and Bruce are just soloing like against each other, like relentlessly, for like 2 minutes in a song, back in the Bruce Springsteen Band. So this predates like the Darkness, Greetings from Asbury Park album, and that's just part of their history of really just laying out against each other these like I say, like dueling lead guitars where they're playing twin leads and they're kind of going back and forth and call and response stuff. So having a bit of a heavier guitar sound with Steven in there, I think that's just natural. And like I say, it's part of their history. It's really cool. There's a song on the first Southside Johnny album. It's a duet with Ronnie Spector called What You Mean to Me. No, is that what it's called? I'm blanking on the song title. But there's an early version of that song by the Bruce Springsteen Band, where Steven and Bruce just, they really go at it. And I love hearing them play that kind of like heavy lead guitar. One of the things that happened at that recent Bruce Springsteen concert in Toronto, the Sunday night show, is somebody was holding up a sign for a really, what I would say is an obscure song. You Mean So Much to Me. That's the name of the song that Ronnie Spector sang with Southside Johnny. Written by Bruce. Anyway, at that Bruce show, somebody was holding up a sign for, it just said priest. So there's a song called If I Was the Priest, which is like an outtake from Greetings from Asbury Park, the solo acoustic Bruce demo. Years later, the E Street Band recorded on the Letters to You album. And they don't play it live very often, but when they do, it ends with like 2 to 3 minutes of Steven just soloing like crazy.
Wow.
So when I saw a person in the crowd with a sign that just said priest, I thought, oh, geez, that'd be really special to see. And sure enough, Bruce called it. He saw the sign, and there's a little bit of confusion on stage because it meant they had to change guitars when they weren't quite ready to change. The next song was supposed to be Atlantic City. So Steven's guitar tech, my friend Ben, was already coming up the steps with a mandolin, because Steven played mandolin on Atlantic City. So Steven hands him his guitar that he was playing on the song before, and all of a sudden Bruce calls out for priest. And for a moment, I went out for dinner with Ben after the show, like the next day or something. So for a moment, he's just on the stairs and he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of frozen. He said it felt like forever. It's probably like 10 seconds. Because he's holding the mandolin for Atlantic City. Now they're not doing that. He's holding the guitar that Steven just gave him. But if they're doing priest, he needs a specific. I think he needs one of his strats for the soloing. So just for a second, he was frozen, and I think Bruce went over to him and just said like, "Come on," or something. He barked something at him, and so he had to quickly run down the steps and figure, oh, where am I going to put this? Because he's got to get the right guitar, but his hands are full. So there's just a little bit of a moment. So anyone who's at that show and noticed that after Bruce said they were going to play priest, that it kind of took like a minute for them to get going. That's what was going on behind the scenes. That
what a great story.
It was kind of hard to switch instruments, but it was amazing because I'd never seen them do priest. Most people haven't, and to see Steven just really let loose. I think it's at least 2 minutes of soloing at the end of the song.
That's awesome. You think about it, all the ranking of great guitar players, and I'll see Rolling Stone, and everybody does one. You never see Bruce or Steven get any accolades for their guitar.
Yeah. Well, and Bruce was, because he made his name as a songwriter, that that took a bit of a backseat. I know that when his first album came out, and of course it's mostly acoustic and it's got a real Dylan-esque kind of style of lyrics, a lot of the early fans in New Jersey and in Philadelphia and New York who were fans of like the Bruce Springsteen band, and they also had a group called Steel Mill that was kind of a harder edge kind of thing. A lot of those fans were kind of put off by the Greetings from Asbury Park album because they're like, who is this guy? Like, there's no guitar solos on this album. Whereas for a while there in the early days, Bruce was known as like a real hot guitar player, and so was Steven. So they did kind of make a conscious decision to focus on songwriting, kind of at the expense of that. But you do get that live now.
Yeah.
Bruce will solo, quite a bit now live when it suits the song.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like to hear that. What happened to me here? My mouse froze. So Blackball Chris is coming to the mall to see you. There you go.
Great.
And Charlie, another great viewer, got here late. Well, better late than never. Just buy the book, Charlie. That's all I can say to you. Wow. Yeah, it's just an amazing book. So when I picked up the book from your store, I shamefully I have no little Steven albums in my collection whatsoever. But I did pick up this because this was sitting in my Amazon cart for the longest time, and I kept meaning to buy it, and then you had it in the store, so I picked it up, which was Little Steven, Disciples of Soul, Summer of Sorcery live at the Beacon Theater. This album is freaking awesome.
Yeah,
really good.
A lot of fun.
It is fun. That's the best way to put it. It's fun, rock and roll, soul. It's just a really great listen with some special guest stars. And amazing. One thing I wanted to mention that we kind of skipped over a little bit, the Sun City thing that Steven got involved in, like that's around the mid 80s, right?
85.
85, yeah. Because I remember it being a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
When it happened. And he took a lot of flack for that as well as pats on the back. Like there were some people who, I'm just trying to go by my memory, I thought there was a lot of negative vibes about all that stuff.
Well, it was more of a political kind of statement than like We Are the World was. There was a few benefit records happening in the 80s. Obviously, Do They Know It's Christmas, We Are the World. Up here in Canada, we had Tears Are Not Enough. Those are all about Ethiopian famine. And, there's not too many people who were like for that. Yay, famine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the Sun City project was a little different, and it was kind of a little hard hitting because it's more about economic racism and, the apartheid legalized system of racism in South Africa that had existed at the time. But, Steven's not one to pull punches. So he would kind of mention that, yes, the systematic approved racism in South Africa is really, really bad, but it's not so great in America either. And so, that's a little edgier a thing to talk about lyrically than those other songs.
And
but
there were
also
some artists who were supporting and going to Sun City and playing and stuff too, right?
Yeah, and that's part of it too, that some artists maybe were misinformed or they didn't quite know what the problem was because they had been duped into playing down there and getting a lot of money for playing to all white audiences down there. But also, the music of Sun City is much harder hitting than those other projects too. He's got a real heavy electronic drum sound, and it's one of the first times he's got like rappers and hip hop artists commingling with Pete Townsend and Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen and Joey Ramone. You got all these rock guys, and then you got Miles Davis in there. So the sound is also really complex, and probably didn't help that the music video is pretty, aggressive as well. It's not just them all, standing in a room holding hands or with their arms around each other singing the chorus. They take black and white footage of a South African policeman beating like a black protester, or probably just a black guy walking down the street.
And Nelson Mandela's still in jail at this point too, right?
Mandela's still in jail. The music video shows some of violence against black people in South Africa. So very hard hitting, hard edits to it. A lot of a real street kind of feel to it. So yeah, some people weren't down with it.
Yeah, it was interesting times for sure. Wow. That's amazing. Well, I just want to I want to talk to you about just some music in general before we call it a night. So, but I do want to encourage people to pick up this great book. It is awesome. I'm so proud that you did this. It's like amazing. 10 out of 10. I can't recommend it highly enough. Solidarity Forever: The Art and Soul of Stevie Van Zandt by Robert Lawson. Great book, hardcover, paperback. Are you going to do an audiobook?
Yeah, maybe he wants to listen to my voice for how many hours?
And available through Amazon and online at all major book retailers. And yeah, amazing book.
You can get it from the publisher's website too. We should mention that friesenpress.com. I guess they have their own online bookstore. It's actually one of the staff picks for the month of December. So
Wow.
it's shown really prominently on their online bookstore website. So you can get it from there. It's definitely cheaper on there than from Amazon.ca, although I don't know how the shipping works. And, if you have Amazon Prime, maybe it all works out. But definitely check out the Friesenpress website.
Wow. That's awesome. Again, great job. Great book. Awesome. Oh, one more question. Do you have your next subject figured out yet? You're going to be doing a fifth book, I'm sure.
No, I don't think so. This is it.
Really? You're done?
Yeah, my wife doesn't like that answer. I'm going out on a high note.
Okay, let me ask it a different way. What would be your grail of someone who you could do a book like this on?
Well, there's a few issues here, Glenn. First of all, it's got to be somebody that I love so much that
that's what I mean. Of course, that has to roll out for sure. You have to be passionate.
But I think it also has to be someone that there isn't already a lot of material out there.
Yeah.
When I wrote my Nazareth book, there were no Nazareth books.
Yeah.
And when I wrote my Cheap Trick book, there was only one, and it had been out of print for quite a while. Written by a friend of mine in Scotland named Mike Hayes. There's been a couple of Cheap Trick books since. Again, with the Guess Who book, the one book by John Einerson, that came out like in the early 90s or something. And he's had offers to revise it. He's never done it yet, anyway. So, and there's never been a book about Stephen except for his own autobiography. So it has to be somebody that it seems like there's a bit of a gap out there. Like I said before, I love Bob Dylan. He's like one of my main heroes. There's like
300 books on Bob Dylan.
Right. So, what are you going to do? So I don't know if I could really, come up with another artist that I care about as much as these guys who don't already have books. Those are the two kind of criteria.
Well, somebody like Miles Davis would make a good one, because I don't, as much as Miles did his own autobiography, and there's been books written, biographies written about him, I don't know if there's ever been one that just focused specifically on the music and the style that you write your books.
Probably not exactly.
That would probably be about 4 volumes.
I have 2 separate Miles Davis books that are only about his electric period.
Yeah.
Which is, from like 68 to like 90 or something. 2 completely different books just about that. So, you could almost do like a whole book just like on the Bitches Brew album alone or something. So I don't know. I would love to, but the Miles catalog is
it's a rabbit hole.
It's big. It's very big. Yeah. Like I have over 100 Miles Davis CDs here, easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are multi-disc box sets. So there's a lot of Miles music.
That's crazy. He's amazing. Are you guys fans of the band Hawkwind? Robert?
I don't know too much about them. I've listened to some of their stuff. I'm a big Motorhead guy, so obviously I know that part of the history. But I've never actually owned any Hawkwind. I probably should, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm very casual with the Hawkwind. I tried with one. Maybe I need to dig deeper because I do like a lot of prog rock bands and stuff. But that for the album I did listen to, I can't remember what it was. It didn't really do much for me, but I'm sure there's some great stuff there. Robert, would you do a book on Iggy Pop?
Probably would be a lot of fun. I don't have that much on Iggy. I probably have most of the early Stones albums, and in a weird thing, and I don't know why. In the early '80s, I think somebody gave me an Iggy Pop album on cassette, and it's a record called Party, and I liked it a lot. I played it a lot. It was only when I got older that then I would, looking through discography books and stuff and see that it's like one of the most hated albums in Iggy Pop's discography. But when I was a kid, I liked it. He does Sea of Love, long before Robert Plant recorded it.
And he does it straight?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
I should re-listen to that Iggy Pop album now. I haven't heard it in decades.
I saw Iggy Pop open for the Pretenders in Edmonton. Man, 86, I think it was 1986. Yeah, he's he's got quite a story. It would be so hard to do his a book in the style that you write books and ignore his craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. How do you leave out the
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay. My favorite, I love talking to you about the book and everything, but I always love asking people what they're listening to right now. I asked you to bring a couple of things. Did you bring anything?
Sure.
You got.
I follow instructions. I'm a good Canadian. I listen to my elders.
Ouch.
So this is a new one, just came out. Bill Evans in Norway. There's he's like my favorite piano player of all time, and in the last 3 or 4 years they've been putting out all these archival releases that they're getting from like European radio stations who recorded concerts, or even TV stations that still have the audio from shows that he did on European tours. So this is a whole show from 1970. It's just one disc. He does So What by Miles Davis.
Oh, wow.
And I have a lot of Bill Evans CDs, like a lot of Bill Evans CDs. And I don't think I have him doing So What on any of them before. So that was a surprise. Great album. I mean, like I said, I'm a huge Bill Evans guy, but this one really blew me away.
I want to see it. Bill Evans in Norway. Wow. I might grab that.
It's very, very good. Bill Evans is, again, without getting into too much gossip or anything like that, around the period of this, he was taking a different medication. Let's say that. So he was a little more vibrant, not so lethargic as some previous medication maybe causes people. So it's a very upbeat recording. So that's great. I love early Tom Petty. Like the first 6 or 7 Tom Petty albums, I think are the best. I don't really listen to anything he did after that. I really don't like the direction he went in, and I don't like how the band members change and all that kind of stuff. So this was a real important release for me. So it's the Long After Dark album with a second disc of all outtakes and live songs, which is great. And then the third disc is a Blu-ray audio and surround sound, which I haven't heard yet. But everything on the second disc is amazing. Some stuff from French TV, some stuff from rehearsals. They could do one of these for every one of the first 6 Tom Petty albums, and I'll buy them all.
Yeah.
Because it's just, that's the period of him that I love. I think this album originally came out in '82, and all these outtakes. There's a song called "Keeping Me Alive," which I've known for years because it was in a Tom Petty documentary, and I was always obsessed with it. And it's on here, so I'm happy with that. This is another new thing that just came out. So it's McCoy Tyner and Joe Henderson. It's a 2-disc set, never been released before. They found it in the drummer is Jack DeJohnette, and these tapes were found in Jack DeJohnette's archives. So working with the DigiNet family, they were able to get this release, and it's amazing. It's really hard-hitting, fast, aggressive stuff. It's acoustic jazz. They're not playing Fender electric basses or anything like that. But yeah, recorded in 1966, and when it starts, like, you think you're listening to like the MC5 or something. There's like
Really?
they're so fast. DigiNet is a very busy player,
Yeah.
and he fills in all the spots, and yeah, they're just going for it. It's also a lot more aggressive than Joe Henderson on sax usually is. It's I mean, it's called Forces of Nature for a reason. It's a
Oh, that's interesting too. That's
it's
two
an
great titles. Awesome. I got introduced to this album. Uh, a woman by the name of Kim Deal. Are you familiar with her?
Oh, from the Breeders,
From the Breeders and the Pixies.
right?
She put out her first solo album this
Hmm.
year, and it's called "Nobody Loves You More," and it's fantastic. It's elements of pop and alternative rock, and but the music is fantastic. It sounds great. It's really well written. I've never heard the Breeders or the Pixies in my life. They're just not in my wheelhouse. But I'm loving this album. Somebody mentioned it as one of their favorites of the year, and I agree. It's fantastic. And also, I don't know if you're a fan of like acoustic stuff, but Gillian Welsh and Dave
Yeah,
Rawlings' new album.
right.
This is incredible. It sounds beautiful. They're always really making sure their albums sound good, and this is just one of the best sounding acoustic albums I've ever heard, and every song's great on it. It's really good. Dave Rollins is such a great guitar player, and really good album.
I've got a few things by them.
And one thing I wanted to mention, because I know you and I both share a passion for world music, is the passing of Zakir Hussain.
Ah, yes, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Shocker. I mean,
yeah,
I think he was only 72.
yeah,
Um,
72, 73 years old. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that was actually on I don't know if I can't really show it to you. On the side of my trusty filing cabinet here is a Zakir Hussain poster, and this has been here for years. This isn't
Really?
new. Can I? Is that going the right way? Uh,
Oh my God! Look at that.
so I've got some little Stephen magnets, but yeah, this
Yeah.
Zakir Hussain poster has been in my apartment for.
What an incredible musician who's played with, goes back. I mean, there's always a Beatle connection. He played with George Harrison and
Yeah, he's on a bunch of Bill Laswell records. I mean, he performed with Shakti, John
yeah,
McLaughlin's acoustic group. Yeah, been around for years and years. I was really hoping that 2025 would finally be the year where I'd be able to see him live, because he has come to Toronto.
I
Uh,
saw him at Corner Hall. That
oh yeah, I know that venue.
I saw him there. I had front row seats to see Bela Fleck and Edgar Meyer and him a few years ago, and it was just incredible. What a
Yeah,
mad
yeah,
musician.
huge loss for sure. That's
Yeah,
yeah,
huge loss, and people just aren't talking about it because it's not mainstream music, but one of the most important musicians. And also, I don't know if you follow any of these. The Bear Sonic Journey series. Owsley, who was the sound man
oh
for the
right.
Dead, and he did a lot of soundboard stuff, and he always kept. And a few years ago, his family found all his soundboard recordings from all the show, and they've been releasing them. They've had some great ones. So they did a Johnny Cash one, but there's one with Ali Akbar Khan
Oh,
and Zakir Hussain.
huh.
It's great.
I haven't seen that. I do have.
Live with the Family Dog at the Great Highway, San Francisco, May 29th, 1970, with Ali Akbar Khan and Zakir Hussain.
Huh. Okay, I need to look into that, because I do have. I might have half a dozen Ali Akbar Khan CDs myself. But
Yeah.
yeah, that looks great. I don't think I ever picked up the Johnny Cash in
Yeah.
that series,
It's actually good at the Carousel Ballroom.
but I would grab that one for sure first. I mean, I'm a Johnny Cash guy for
Well,
sure.
it sounds
But
great too.
oh
Sounds amazing.
man, okay, that's a good tip. That's a good
Yeah.
tip. I need to look into that.
And of course, I got to get more Little Steven. Now I got to. What's your favorite Little Steven album? Do you have one that you think stands out?
Well, when you collect music for years, often people will ask you, the ridiculous question of what's your favorite album of all time, which,
I
it's
have one.
it's impossible. But, over the last few years, I mean, when I started writing the book, I came to the realization that I do have one album that I would have to say is my favorite of all time, and it's Little Steven's debut, Men Without Women from '82.
Okay.
I mean, I've been listening to the thing since February '83, like I said, and I still love it as much as I ever did. The mix of, you got a singer who kind of sounds like Dylan. He's playing the 5-string open tuning style of Keith Richards, that of course, we know and love from so many famous Stone songs. And then he's got like Motown style horns on it. Like, how could I not love that? Like, that's
Yeah.
that's a recipe for Robert Lawson to love it.
Yeah.
So I would say Men Without Women is definitely, and it's the closest thing coming from Southside Johnny and Asbury Jukes. There's more guitar on it than the Jukes albums, but that mix of a rock sound and R&B and soul elements, I think he perfected that with Men Without Women. And
I gotta get that album then.
yeah, that's definitely one to get.
I'm just gonna grab a few comments here before we call it a night. Todd Rundgren would be an interesting subject. And there we go. Hint, hint. The Life of Bill Evans.
Right, yeah. So that would be pretty tempting, because I do have a lot of Bill Evans. When I was living in Sacramento, I got a really great deal on this box set called it's the Complete Verve, and it's a kind of a notorious box set where it comes in a metal box. It's heavy as sin, and it's meant to rust over time. And I don't know how many of these, I don't know how many of these things they made. I'm sure not very many, because it is so heavy and just difficult. It's got these heavy hinges on the back of it, and it's intentionally that every version will look different. So I think they're numbered, actually. So each one has different rust patterns, and they're getting corroded over the years. But I have that. It's like, I don't know, 30 discs or something, like everything he ever did at Verve. But I have a lot of other, like I said, this new series that they're doing of Bill Evans from the archives. I think this is like the 6th one so far, and I have them all. Like, I'm picking them all up. They're great.
That's excellent. You might have me going to Amazon and filling up my cart here after we finish. Joel, I'm listening to The Immediate Family. Danny Kuchmar, Waddy Watto, Russ Kunkel, and 2 others. All session, man. Great hard-hitting sound. I wasn't aware that they put an album out. Interesting. Certainly great session musicians who all have incredible resumes. Shakti was the most incredible ensemble. It was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of Shakti, including, they put out a box set a while back when they did a reunion tour, and I think it's it might be 3 or 4 CDs and then a DVD of a show. It's on Verve, but it comes in this gorgeous silk. Like, the box set is covered with all these Indian designs, and there's this long ribbon that comes out that you have to pull out to get each of the cases out. It's gorgeous. I mean, the music is amazing as well. But
is it still available?
Oh God, no! I'm sure it was way too expensive to. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
I'll have to have that ready. We'll do a show just of like unique packaging, and I'll have the Bill Evans box and the Shakti, and we can talk about weird box sets or something.
Well, then I better pull my Grateful Dead sets out then.
Sure.
Well, I guess we're going to call it a night, Robert. I can't thank you enough for doing this. I really appreciate it. Everybody who watched, thank you. Please tell your friends and neighbors to watch the replay. It'll be up for your viewing pleasure whenever you want to watch it. Hopefully a ton of people will pick up on it. And hopefully a ton of people will buy Robert's book, because it's well worth reading. If you're a music fan, it's a can't miss read. It really is.
Yeah, please reach out to me on social media. If anyone's, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and even Twitter sometimes. And if you want a signed copy, we can arrange that. But otherwise, yeah, Amazon will get you one straight away.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for watching. Again, thanks, Robert. I so appreciate this.
That was a lot of fun.
Okay, take care.